Hello and welcome to the History of Bangalore. I am Ramjee Chandran and this is episode 21, part 8 of my series on the Chalukyas. If you are joining me from this episode and you haven't heard the previous episodes, no matter, you can go back and listen to any of them anytime you like, and I will try to keep this one on track. So let's begin with the story so far. It took me the last 4 episodes to tell you the story of Immadi Pulakeshi, a man who in life and death was a warrior. After a career of astonishingly successful military campaigns, Pulakesin finally met his match with the Pallavas. He notably lost the Battle of Manimangalam in 642 AD, deep inside Pallava territory. Having suffered untenable losses at Manimangalam, he sounded the retreat and headed home to Vatapi. But his foe, Narasimhavarman I, probably deciding that the threat of Pulakesin must end forever, pursued him there and laid siege to his capital. And in 642 AD, Immadi Pulakeshi lost the Battle of Vatapi and his life. When Narasimhavarman successfully attacked Vatapi, it wasn't merely the victory of a battle, it was the rout of war. And he occupied the capital Vatapi, or Badami as we know it, but it didn't seem like his heart was in it, and the Pallavas didn't pay much attention to running the kingdom, leaving things the way they were. And for the 13 years that a Pallava presence sparsely hung around in Vatapi, there was predictably much confusion in the kingdom until one of Pulakeshi's sons, Vikramaditya I, coalesced forces and feudatories, and then, with the help of his grandfather Durbinita of the Gangas, forced the half-hearted Pallavas out and reunified the kingdom. This was almost a replay of what happened with his father when he had returned from exile to settle his kingdom from the consequences of a fratricidal war. And now we move on to the history at hand. What happened after Immadi Pulakesi? But first, I must pause to thank the Prestige Group for their corporate sponsorship, which makes this podcast possible. Building cities, one landmark at a time, they transform dreams into reality. You can be a part of the future. Simply add prestige to your life. In the pantheon of India's legendary conquerors and empire builders, Pulakesin II stands as a towering figure. The heft of his empire and that of his feared and respected army, the Karnataka Bala or the Karnataka Bala, had been unmatched except now by the Pallavas. Pulakeshi's death left more of a yawning chasm than a void. The presence of a powerful ruler binds all forces, it keeps everyone busy and gainfully distracted, but conversely, a sudden absence of one has the opposite effect. Now let's briefly look at what happened in the 13 years between 642 AD, the Battle of Vatapi, and 655 AD, when Vikramaditya got the throne. If the Pallavas had been committed to running the kingdom, they would easily have filled any void left by anyone. The Pallavas were no strangers to running a large kingdom. But the trouble was the monarch, Narasimhavarman I, seemed to have no interest in running the newly acquired Chalukya kingdom. Briefly though, to save a victory, he was given the title Vatapi Konda, which means conqueror of Vatapi. And he had an inscription carved on a rock in Badami. It is written in the ancient Pallava Grantha script, and it is located on a rock behind the Mallikarjuna temple. In it, Narasimhavarman is compared to the sage Agastya, who is said to have battled the demon Vatapi. But that is another day, another story. Anyway, all of these were only public assertions of victory, probably retribution for Pulakeshi's attack on his father Mahendravarman some years before. Narasimhavarman left Vatapi almost immediately after the battle and returned to his capital, Kanchipuram. He had bigger fish to fry. Records show that he embarked on a naval campaign to Sinhala, or Sri Lanka as we know it, where he reinstated his friend Manavamma to the throne of Anuradhapura in Lanka. Manavamma had been in exile in Kanchipuram, and being an experienced military tactician, he had joined Narasimhavarman's forces in his battles against Pulakesin, and the time had come for Narasimhavarman to return the favor. Now back to the Chalukyas. Despite digging around, I have not been able to come to a conclusion on what the Pallavas did with Pulakesin's family. It doesn't even look like the Chalukya royal family were driven from their homes or palaces. In fact, epigraphical evidence names Chalukya kings in this period of 13 years. It looked like the Pallavas did not disturb existing structures of administration of the kingdom, and governors and officials, I would imagine, simply went about doing their jobs, collecting taxes and whatever else. So without a strong center to the kingdom, it falls to reason that everything fell to disarray. Opportunists were out in force trying to grab whatever pieces of the pie they could. So, ironically, the Pallavas were not the threat to the continuity of the Chalukya kingdom. The Chalukyas themselves were the threat. These were dark days. Among those who wanted to carve up and parcel off the kingdom were Pulakesin's two older sons. Now, Pulakesin had 5 children that we know about. His sons, Chandraditya, Rana Ragavarman, Vikramaditya, and Jaisimha, in that order, and a much-debated daughter, Amara or Ambara. There are some other theories on the names of Pulakesin's older sons. There have been mentions of an Aditya Varman as the oldest son. In an essay devoted to the subject, though, in the anthology Readings in South Indian History, T.V. Mahalingam suggests that Aditya Varman and Vikramaditya are the same person. It's a compelling argument, but not everybody bought it. Anyway, all that's academic, and what matters to us now is that everyone agrees that Vikramaditya was the 3rd son. The theory of what happens next, again, is divergent. One is that there was a quick succession of rulers, Aditya Varman, then his son Abhinav Aditya, followed by his brother Chandra Aditya, and then Chandra Aditya's wife, the Queen Vijaya, who ruled as regent, probably for their son. But because of the dates of this line of succession, 643 AD to 655 AD, it only raises questions about how there could have been a succession of rulers when the Pallavas were supposed to have been the rulers. Then there's the possibility that these kings may have been sons who had continued to run principalities in different parts of the kingdom where they had been serving as governors under their father, and once they decided to declare independence, they were simply referred to as Chalukya kings because they were royals. And if that was the case, and if they wanted to carve up the kingdom, it is wholly likely that none of them saw themselves as worthy successors of Immadi Pulakesi and probably felt satisfied in continuing in their fiefdoms. But the 3rd son, Vikramaditya I, had larger ambitions. Now, as we know from before, Vikramaditya's mother was Ganga Mahadevi, and she was the daughter of the Ganga king, Durvinita. And so, Vikramaditya turned to his powerful grandfather, Durvinita, for help. Durvinita was the most amazing of all Ganga kings. I have an entire episode on Durvinita. Do listen to it if you haven't already. He was the ultimate Renaissance man, warrior and poet, a man of astonishing talents. So while everyone saw opportunity in chaos, Vikramaditya sensed opportunity of a different kind. He was the only one who had the dream. He saw himself as someone who could reunify the Chalukyan Empire and restore it to its glory. And so he decided to get the Pallavas out and take back the kingdom. When I come back, Vikramaditya will become the next emperor of the Chalukyas. Right after this.
Just how the North Star is the guiding light, the star of North Bangalore, Prestige Camden Gardens is a guiding light where your search for the perfect home ends. Prestige Camden Gardens, the star of North Bangalore. Step up to luxury with 3 and 4 BHK apartments on Tanisandra Main Road, 10 minutes from Manyata Tech Park, 25 minutes from the airport, and well connected with other parts of the city. Prestige Camden Gardens. Prices starting from 2.25 crore onwards. To know more, visit prestigeconstructions.com. RERA approved.
Hello, and I'm back. It was between 654 and 655 AD when Vikramaditya ascended to the throne. But how exactly did he do this? It is said that there was one or more battles that ended the Pallava presence, but the narrative seems incomplete. A battle as significant as this, with a result as significant as this, would have been recorded on Chalukya inscriptions and preserved for posterity. But the only reference to any battle to drive out the Pallavas is not even a Chalukya inscription, but a Ganga inscription that reads, "Having captured the Kaduveti of Kanchi, who is celebrated as Ravana on this earth, on the field of battle, and having established his own daughter's son in the hereditary kingdom of Jaisima Vallabha, Durvinita became famous in the world." Now, as you can tell, this is a Ganga inscription about Durvinita, and I went over this inscription in that episode about Durvinita. Essentially, it says that Durvinita defeated the Pallavas and put his daughter's son, Vikramaditya, on the throne. Now, that much adds up. But, I repeat, that is a Ganga inscription. So did the Ganga army defeat the Pallavas all on their own? That's as unlikely as it is likely. Likely because, as we saw, the standing army of the Pallavas had already moved on to other battles in Sinhala or Lanka and other places. And there is some evidence that the remnant forces in Vatapi were only a garrison placed there for namesake and could probably very easily have been overcome by any committed army. And the sparse presence of just a single garrison could also have been one of the reasons why there was even a line of succession in the interregnum of the Pallavas' 13 years. So why wasn't there a larger battle? Probably because the Pallavas didn't care. I imagine that if the Pallavas had been really possessive about the Chalukya kingdom, the battle would have been much bloodier and merited much more than a passing mention. Even that Ganga inscription I mentioned is buried inside a genealogy of the Gangas at that. Well, whatever be the details, Vikramaditya got the throne, and now he had huge tasks ahead of him. First, he would have to be rid of the Pallavas. Then he would need to rid himself of any claims to the throne from his older brothers. There was no problem from the younger brother, who stood by Vikramaditya's side and whom Vikramaditya rewarded with the governorship in the northern territories. And not the least, he would have to get all the feudatories to fall in line. By 655 AD, the Pallavas were driven out or left, and Vikramaditya took the throne. Stepping into the large shoes of Pulakesin II, one imagines, would have been the great challenge. But rarely has there been an occasion in history when one glorious king was succeeded by another glorious king, and Vikramaditya appears to have matched his father in remarkably similar ways. Of course, he was able to stand on his father's shoulders, and despite his exertions to restore the kingdom that its elder custodians were looking to destroy, nothing was a simple accomplishment. And no matter whether there was a major battle with the Pallavas or not to vacate the kingdom, Vikramaditya did give the once glorious kingdom of the Chalukyas a new era and a new glory to let his city on the hill shine for another few centuries. The Talamaji inscription ordered up by him sums up this succession in the usual poetic way that inscriptions and prashastis do. The Sanskrit version is more evocative, of course, but I'll do the English translation, and it reads, "He who at the head of many famous battles, assisted by none but his noble steed named Chitrakanta, and by the edge of his glittering, spotless and sharp sword, which behaved like a tongue in licking the blood of hostile kings, conquered would-be conquerors by his own arms, which resemble the coils of the serpent, who carries the burden of the earth, into whose own armor many blows had plunged, and who, having gained for himself the royalty of his father, caused the burden of the whole kingdom to be governed by himself alone." And this prashasti ends with giving Vikramaditya the same lofty titles that had been accorded to his father, and this included Satyashraya, Sri Prithvi Vallabha, Maharaja Raja, and Parameshwara. The reference to his steed Chitrakanta is a rather charming and intimate detail. Now, it must be said that Vikramaditya did not proclaim himself to be the emperor until he had actually retaken control over his father's dominions. Speaking of which, Pulakeshi's empire had been divided into three main regions: Vatapi, the heart of the empire, the Andhra, which he controlled, and the areas of Konkana, Maharashtra and Gujarat, which he had conquered. After his defeat and the chaos in the kingdom, the Chalukyas lost control over much of their lands, wherever feudatories and other opportunists likely took advantage. When Vikramaditya came to power, before he could consider expanding beyond his father's empire, he needed to secure his own legitimacy. To do this, he first focused on restoring Chalukya rule over all the territories that his father had once controlled. And another key part of this effort was reinstating all the earlier land grants that had been made to temples and to Brahmins that had been usurped by others. And in 657 AD, he saw himself fit as having earned the credibility to call himself the emperor. The reign of Vikramaditya is notable for two reasons. First, that he was able to reunite kingdom and country and restore the days of glory. The other was his revenge battle against the Pallavas for having killed his father and for having left Vatapi in such a ruinous state. Vikramaditya wanted revenge, so he set out to attack Kanchipuram, which was now under the rule of Parameshwaravarman I. Vikramaditya sought the assistance of the Pandyas, and he created an alliance with the Pandya king Adikesari Manavarman I, who was known as a warrior himself and had fought battles against the Pallavas. So, going by the Mandala theory that I had described in my last episode, the Pandyas and the Chalukyas were natural allies. Vikramaditya marched upon Kanchi and laid siege to it. He drove Parameshwara out of Kanchi and into a temporary exile, but he didn't actually capture the city, just as Pulakeshi before him had not. He set up camp in Urayur on the banks of the Kaveri and regrouped forces with his Pandyan allies. But Parameshwara quickly gathered a force and gave battle. The first of the battles was the Battle of Vilande, where the Ganga prince Bhuvikrama defeated Parameshwara decisively. But unwilling to give up, Parameshwara regrouped again and attacked, this time in the village of Peruvalanallur, only a few kilometers north of Urayur, where Vikramaditya was camped. The Kuriam inscription has a graphic and bloody description of the battle. In this battle, the Pallavas defeated the Chalukyas and drove them out of the territory back to Vatapi. And thus ended another battle between the forces, once again without a decisive end, allowing the enmity to continue for more battles to happen over succeeding generations. And in the aftermath of the initial successes and then the quick defeat in the Kanchi campaign, Vikramaditya came back home to a period of peace. Vikramaditya I ruled for 27 years, between 654 and 681 AD. Many narrators of this history, in my opinion, have failed to capture how significant was the Battle of Vatapi as a pivotal point in the history of the Chalukyas. Looked at one way, nothing was remarkably different when Vikramaditya took over after the Pallava interregnum, and his life, in many ways, was a rerun of his father's, with the exception that the northern territories did not feature much in his life. But if Vikramaditya had not reunited and rebuilt the kingdom following the devastation of the Battle of Vatapi, that point in their history would not only have been pivotal but catastrophic for the Chalukyas. Equally, if the Pallavas had desired to establish dominion, the remaining Chalukyas would simply have joined the list of feudatories of the Pallavas. But they did not, and Vikramaditya did unify the kingdom and restore its glory. It must also be noted that the fall of Vatapi was also the start of the twilight of the Chalukyan Empire. The battle fractured the soul of the empire, and it was only the presence of a strong and committed ruler like Vikramaditya who could be glue to the different forces. But once he left the throne in 681 AD, there was a line of kings who followed, each of whom contributed a tale or two of historical significance and one or two flashes of glory and more battles against the Pallavas, but none of the heft of Pulakesin and his son Vikramaditya. And so, to that end, Vikramaditya I must be mentioned in the pantheon of kings who could be considered great. Before I go, something interesting about Vatapi. There is not a South Indian of my acquaintance who doesn't know the song Vatapi Ganapati, and this kriti directly ties in with this part of history. It is said that Paranjoti, the feared general of Narasimhavarman I, who led the assault on Vatapi, was captivated by the idol of Ganapati that he found in the lower Shivalaya temple that stands even today on top of a hill in Badami. In the spoils of war, he removed the idol and, with the reverence and ritual accorded to the relocation of deities, moved the Ganapati idol to the Uttarapatishwara Swami temple in Tiruchengatankudi, Paranjyoti's hometown near Tiruvarur. Art experts agree, though, that this could not have been the original idol, as the styles differ significantly. Others argue that the fact that it is called Vatapi Ganapati is a large clue. The truth of the idol of Vatapi Ganapati might remain lost to us, but one day, sometime in the early 1800s, the great Muthuswami Dikshitar, one of the trinity of Carnatic music composers, the other two being Tyagaraja and Shama Shastri, visited the temple. Something came over him when he saw the idol, and it moved him to compose the song Vatapi Ganapati, which has become easily the most famous kriti in all of Carnatic music, considered so auspicious that it is often sung in the beginning of Carnatic concerts. And something about Paranjyoti. I refuse to say that the idol had anything to do with it, but something did come over this dreaded military veteran Paranjyoti. Not long after he returned home, he gave up his military life, indeed all violence, and became a Shaiva monk. He is venerated to this day as one of only 63 Nayanar saints. Coming up in the next episode, the sunset and the end of the Chalukyas and the rise of the Rashtrakutas. And this is the point where we start to come closer home to the history of the Bengaluru region. So much of history to discover, it is so fulfilling. I am Ramjee Chandran, and this is the History of Bangalore.